Fellow Blender enthusiasts, my name is Michael, I'm a concept artist, and I've been learning Blender in order to animate my concept art. Unfortunately, I didn't find too many tutorials that helped me to develop my vision, but I experimented a little bit, I learned a couple of things, and I would like to share them. I would like to document them, and maybe it's useful for you as a tutorial. It is geared towards a little bit more intermediate users, so I won't cover the basics. I will cover the methods and the logic behind the stuff. And today I want to talk about shaders, because I didn't really understand shader nodes until I had a specific problem that I would like to demonstrate. So let's get to the project. This is my current image that I'm working on. It's still in development. I will just hit the play button. As you can see, we have some flags moving, we have some wind simulation, we have some smoke that is being distorted, but I want to keep a 2D painterly style, so the smoke is not made with the particle effects, it's only a layer of smoke that I have changed with the shape keys. There I put some rotation into it, I changed the vertices a little bit so it looks like smoke movement. For me it's very convincing. But I had a little problem. It's so small that you won't see it, but it kept bugging me. In the middle here there is some fog, and hopefully we can see it if I zoom out. Where is it? Somewhere here in this corner. There is a little bit of smoke, you can barely notice it, and it's also distorted through the shape keys. And what I wanted to do, let me isolate it, so hopefully it's better visible. You can't see it that well. Let me add quickly a black plane. So adding a plane, rotating it 90 degrees and moving it a little bit into the back, and this needs also some color, so let's create a new color node and give it let's give it a black color. That should suffice. Okay, here we go. There is our smoke. So as you can see, let me deactivate also the blend mode. Let's make it alpha blend so it doesn't have this grainy look. This is the smoke, and it's just being distorted through the vertices. Doesn't look super convincing, but in the context of all things it's all right. And I was thinking, I want this smoke to dissolve into transparency as it goes up. And not only that, maybe we can make it even more complicated. Not only dissolves it into some kind of transparency gradient, but also into a random type of transparency. So basically a gradient mixed together with a noise texture. This is the idea behind it. And I didn't really understand shading, but what I understood is that shading works quite mathematically. It just takes a channel from a pixel and adds some values together or subtracts them, etc., etc. So with a little bit of experimentation, I came up with something that I would like to show to you if you have a similar situation. Let's open my experiment project, which looks like this. And this is the shader I've constructed. It's relatively simple. I will disconnect it here so we have a clearer vision of what's going on. First, there is some basic things that are important. My image looks like this. You see there's the smoke that we already saw, and usually I paint the lights in my scene myself by hand in order to preserve this painterly look. So I don't need any type of light in this scene, but the texture has to emit its own light. So the the color from my image goes into an emission node, which goes into a mixed shader. And the alpha channel goes into the mixed shader as well. It goes into this, I assume it stands for factor or whatever, FAC node. And we need a transparent BDSF that is connected to the upper shader node. So it recognizes the alpha channel and treats it as a transparent material. So I didn't really know a lot about shaders and why they have to be this way, but I understood, okay, alpha, for some reason the alpha channel can be read through or Blender can read out the alpha channel, but it doesn't really know what to do with the alpha channel. I would assume intuitively, okay, it's alpha, what the hell are you supposed to do? It's just transparency, but you can attach the alpha channel to a completely different, how should I say, operation. So obviously apparently it had to go into this FAC node, and the shader node underneath it is connected with the transparent BSDF. So basically the alpha channel is treated as a transparency, and the color is treated with an emission node, so it emits light and goes into the shader, and the mixer shader mixes it all together and puts it into the material output. And I was like, okay, there seems to be some kind of logic behind it. So my idea was at first to add a gradient. And from what I have seen, gradient textures and also noise textures consist only of two colors. The same goes for the alpha channel, by the way. It can be encoded into black and white. I think white is completely transparent and black is like a mask. It's non-transparent, right? And everything that is gray is to a certain degree transparency. And my idea was, okay, or the reasoning was, a gradient texture is probably just a gradient from black to white. It can be easily mathematically described, fine. A noise texture is probably some type of random texture that you can, as you hopefully can see, you can adjust the scale. There seems to be an algorithm behind it, but it's probably also black and white with some gray stuff. So let's keep this in mind. And let's look at the gradient texture first. So I think we don't, do we need this? Yes, we need it. And let me load a different image so we can see it better what's going on. Okay, something like this. Okay. So let's take it from behind, top down. Our material output. There is a mix shader that mixes whatever we have built in the bottom, the standard image node operations. And then again, we have the same setup as below. One shader node just collects the image information that has been calculated so far. The upper shader node takes a transparent BSDF because I'm adding another layer of transparency, and the FAC factor whatever node is there to describe how this transparency shader is being applied. So okay, we have the same logic as below. And the way how this is constructed is relatively easy. We have a gradient texture, which by itself only creates a gradient, but I want to position this gradient. So I need two other nodes. I need a texture coordinate and a mapping node. The texture coordinate is necessary, otherwise the mapping by itself, it's somewhere. I cannot really use it. I need to use a texture coordinate where the generated coordinates go into the vector. Otherwise it's just, I don't know, unusable. And from the mapping vector, this vector goes into the gradient texture. So it's quite linear, just, you know, reconstruct these nodes. So, and the location determines the point where my transitions take place. Of course, there's a little add-on. The z-axis rotation has to be rotated 90 degrees, otherwise the the gradient goes from left to right, which can be useful if you need it, but I need it to go from bottom to top, right? So I need 90 degrees here. Of course, you have a scale here as well. I think the Y scale can determine the size of the fall off of your gradient. This is adjustable here, no problem. But my primary parameter is the X location, you know, because the X axis has been tilted 90 degrees, so this is what I need. I've constructed this and I was happy and proud of myself and thought, man, you start to understand shaders. But then I thought, yeah, I want to make it a little bit more complicated. I want to add a noise texture because I want this fall off to be a little bit more random. Because why not? There is a thing called dynamic alpha. Maybe you have seen some developer talks about it. When you have several layers that have alpha channel and they intersect each other and move in different directions, you can create effects like fire, for instance, or particle-like effects, or VFX basically. And it's a very efficient way to approximate certain effects. And I was thinking about this, combining the gradient channel, you know, basically the how do you call it, the values of the gradient, with the values of the noise texture. And as I said, they are mostly encoded in a scale from black to white. So I created the same thing with the noise texture. I needed the mapping and the texture coordinates, otherwise I wouldn't be able to position my gradient, my noise texture properly, because I also wanted to manipulate the X, Y, Z position of it, or only the X position is enough, but it wouldn't work without the texture coordinate and the mapping tool. And then I tried to mix it, and I wasn't sure where I should mix it. And finally, I found a solution, and not through a mix shader node, but through a very simple add node, because the idea is it's not a shader per se, it's just brightness values that have to be calculated. So some kind of mathematical operation is necessary, and addition, or you can do different kind of operations, which I will show you in a bit, seems to be the tool. And so if I remember correctly, let's reconstruct this. This gradient texture has to go into my add node, and the noise texture has also to go into the add node. Behind this, I put in some color ramp. It's not necessary, but it could be an interesting parameter to tweak. I will show you this in a bit. And the output of the color ramp goes into my factor. I assume it's a factor. I'm not sure what FAC means, but apparently you can determine the transparency factor, I assume, here. So it's not linear, but it has to be, it's basically attached to a map. So the color output goes into this node. And what we have is exactly what I wanted. We have a gradient, and the gradient color that is coded to transparency gets added with the colors that come from the noise texture, as you can see. So it's exactly the effect that I have been looking for. And for instance, the color ramp node helps me to define the border, basically. So it's after my add node, after my addition node, and I can say how hard or how soft the transition should be. You know, I can basically add more contrast to my fall off, which already looks a little bit like smoke, to be fair. So if I have a smoke image with some alpha channel and on top of that my construction, it probably will look convincing. This is basically everything you need to know, but I will throw in a little bit of extra knowledge how to animate this whole stuff. I was really afraid of using node animation because I didn't really understand how to do it, and I didn't even know that you can animate the parameter of the nodes, but I thought this must be possible. And it's very, very easy. You can, for instance, let's start with this value, how it is. You right click on any parameter of your node and you can insert a keyframe. And then this is on 0, and then let's jump to keyframe 100. Then we change the value. Let's see how it looks. Maybe like this. Right click again, insert keyframe. Now we have some movement, which already looks quite interesting, I would say. But I don't see the keyframes, and I was really confused about this, and there are two things that you have to check. First, you have to click on the object that has the shader nodes, and then you click on the specific node of your shader in order to display the keyframes. So now I can see them, and now I can manipulate them even further. So in this way, you can basically animate any parameter mathematically. For instance, let's see, what do we have here? Maybe the y-axis, just as an example. So right-click, insert keyframes. So I move to frame 100 and move it to whatever, a little bit further, insert keyframe. So we should have, okay, it doesn't look pretty. Why? Because I think the value is just too high. Let's turn it down a little bit, maybe like this. Oh. Okay, replace keyframe. Yeah, it looks a little bit smoother. So we have some movement in the noise texture going on the y-axis. We have some movement of the overall gradient going on the also on the y-axis, and yeah, so you can add a lot of things, and you can also add, for instance, the position of your color ramp, so it gets even more contrasty as it moves along. This is up to you. I just wanted to explain the node setup, the shader setup, and the mathematical logic behind it. All right, I hope it helped you, and leave a comment if you have some optimization or anything in particular that you want to add. Thank you for your attention.